Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
What spiritual movement happened in early America that changed the history of our country back in the 1800s? What and where is this movement happening now? And let's talk about, do spiritualists have holidays? And I just gave away the answer to the first question. Hello, this is Angelscapes, and I am your host, Nancy Smith. Joining me is medium Stacy Schuerman. We're going to have a lively discussion and some debate about spiritualism in America right now. In this winter season, when many are celebrating religions and they want equal time on what their religion is, I would like to also talk about, do spiritualists celebrate holidays? What holidays are those? And spiritualism, back to that question, has had a profound effect on the progression of early religions. And what is the influence that we're having now? And also, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. So Stacy is an ordained minister, spiritualist minister. She's a teacher and a healer. And she's an amazing human being. I know Stacy from Lilydale Sacred Gowns coffee shop, but she also has taught and has served in so many churches in so many places around the country that I don't even know. So she's going to give us a really nice outlook on how the different spiritualists, run their world in the spirit, in their own community. So welcome, Stacy. There's a lot more to say about you.
Keep it simple. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks. Keep it simple, I always say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's great being here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, me too. Me too. We have had some really lively conversations, you and I, when we just met, and then when we decided to do this program together.
Yeah.
And you said so many things that I just wanted to just showcase here. But one of the things that you talked about was really spiritualism started in the camps, because that's where we met. We went at Lilydale, one of the biggest camps, but there's camps all over the country. And how many have you been to?
A lot. Or I've been to grounds where there have been and no longer exist. But, I think I remember we were talking about the movement of spiritualism, because I think a lot of people just think that, it's just some kind of religion made by a person or, the Fox sisters. And that's it, and it's so much more than that. Like in its birth, it was simply, it wasn't even a religion. It was just simply this idea, this ideology, this theology of the fact that we live forever, and that communication with actual communication with those that have crossed over into the spirit world is not only possible, it's provable.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's also a movement. I just wanted to just a little bit drop that in. It was a movement, and just the Fox sisters, the phenomena happened at the time that there was this free thinking movement happening.
Absolutely.
And they all kind of blended together. There's the Quakers, the Shakers, and they all blended together. And then spiritualism was born, the movement of spiritualism. And then I don't know how long before it was they made it into an actual religion or an actual.
Well, probably around like 1890s, 1900s is when it actually became, if you want to say USA approved, religious organization. But you're absolutely right. And, the thing is it wasn't just happening. Yes, by all means, I do respect the Fox sisters wholeheartedly, right? And I talk about them all the time, but they were a small fraction of the movement. I mean, you were talking by mid if you're talking about 1860s, 1870s, you're talking about coast to coast. And it wasn't like you could just get on a plane and fly from New York to California. So this movement happened organically through the mountains and over the woods and, over the lakes. It literally just spread across the country in a huge, fast way for that time. Because, like I said, it's not like people were, grabbing, the planes and the trains and the automobiles and headed out to spread the word. I mean, you look at some of our pioneers like Peebles or Cora, Richmond. I mean, they traveled the world like a couple times each, and that was no small feat. Do you know?
It took months. It took weeks, months, years, not
at
years.
the time.
But so we got this all the way to San Francisco. There's a church in San Francisco now.
Oh yeah.
Florida now, and then all the way up Maine.
Yeah.
And then you're from Wisconsin.
And in Washington. I'm in the Midwest. Yeah. Washington, they have a camp there. Well, and that's what, going back, I know I get off tangent sometimes, Nancy. I'm like a squirrel in traffic, so you'll just have to guide me back in. But that being said, camps, societies. So again, churches weren't forming. There were already churches. Spiritualism wasn't meant, in my opinion, and I will happily go up against, because I'm sure this is a debatable question. Spiritualism wasn't really, modern spiritualism wasn't meant to be a religion. It was meant to enhance the religions or prove the afterlife to all the religions that believed in an afterlife.
Exactly. Which pretty much all of them do.
Yeah, I think, atheism, maybe not, but there's not many that don't, and so, these groups of people, these free thinkers, these people who, were not necessarily, I don't want to say challenging their religion, but trying to maybe understand their religion more from maybe a science or a philosophical aspect, started meeting. And they probably met in people's houses or church basements. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure we could look into the history of so many different. And then all of a sudden, around that same time, 1880s, 1900s, Lilydale's going to be celebrating its 145th year this year. So, go back in time. That's a long time ago. People started coming from all parts of the state and sometimes states, depending on the location, to hear these free thinkers, to hear these spiritualists talk about the afterlife, demonstrate the mediumship and continuity, demonstrate the healing aspects, all of these things. So camps or societies, to me, in my, and again, I am no expert, I'm just somebody who's really cannot own enough books and read enough history.
Well, that's how it is within history. That's how it is. It's word of mouth. I learned this thing. I learned this. Did you hear about the thing? And I feel like spiritualism is like that. Anyway, there's no strong dogma. There's no Catholicism. Here's the big book on it's not, it's a lot, it's community, it's word of mouth, it's one community talking to another. And there are so many factions of spiritualism. There's the standard, dyed in the wool spiritualists, and then there's the advanced new age spiritualists, and then there's the Christian spiritualists. And I love what you said about that. It wasn't meant to be a religion. It was meant to augment other religions that said that there was life after death, and spiritualism was proving that actually that was true. But the other thing that spiritualism did back in the day, which is why I think maybe even Catholicism, but maybe other religions, more stated Christian religions, is that it took the church away from being the middleman.
Yeah. Yes.
We had a direct connection to God, to source. And we also don't believe in, I say we, because I'm a spiritualist, vicarious atonement. Took that away. Mm-hmm. And that lost popularity too.
Yeah. And brought on that personal, to me, I love the personal responsibility that spiritualism brings. It's so I can see in parts of my life or moments of my experience where it's hard to be personally responsible. It would be so much easier to point a finger and blame someone else or
just turn it off.
or ask the great power to be to forgive me and allow, and atone for, take the atonement away so I don't have to deal with it. I mean, there are sometimes, especially when I'm driving a car and people don't use their blinker, but anyways.
I know, but there are. I just want to bring this back that there are religions that turn spiritualism into you. They're talking to the devil.
Yeah.
That doing something very evil. And I said, well, you just made it evil because you didn't want to lose your power. But that's political. But I feel that during the tent churches during the time, those Calvinistic tent churches, spiritualism brought a whole new story.
Absolutely.
And it
Well,
changed.
and when you think about that time period, like, so when you talk about camps, I mean, not every state had a camp, right? But I bet you every state had some form of group or society or camp that met quietly and discussed this. Do you know, even when you look through your heavy Bible belt, you can still find these little areas that exist or existed, where people gathered, mediumship was demonstrated, the I hate to say the weird spiritualists were in town or whatever giving a talk, debates were occurring all over, and honestly, I can't take credit for the whole idea of, spiritualism being that, that little jewel added to any religion that proves the continuity. That was Moses Hall, who was a big, pioneer in our movement. That was one of his greatest debates. I mean, to this day, he was a Seventh-day Adventist, if I'm saying that correctly. He turned away. That you can still find him. Like, they still shun him, like, online, like, Moses Hall, like, but he sat and he went to like halls, like these tents, like the tents, like your churches you're talking about. And I'm not talking 20 people showing up. I'm talking about thousands of people coming together to
In horse
hear.
and buggy, and
Yeah,
they're
or train. Yeah.
yeah.
But the old type of train. Do you know what I mean? Not the speedy Amtrak, the right? You know, thousands of people coming to these camps to bear witness to mediumship, to bear witness to the talks and the ideas and the new theories, not that was just the theory that was written in the holy, whatever holy scripture your religion might have. It challenged the status quo.
Well, the picture, let's go back to the picture of the camps with all these horse and buggies and coming in. These camps still exist, and these camps still have those original buildings, and they're trying to update them and put electricity in. There's one I went into, Lilydale, still had gas lights, and that was a modern upgrade. And so,
Yeah.
but so the tried and true people who really were the heroes of spiritualism, that they traveled to all these different places and were very excited about what was happening. And today, the camps are still there, and we're still, they're still attended, maybe not by the thousands, but people are still going, and they're still very curious. And then that book came out about Camp Etna that kind of had a color, but not the true color of spiritualism, and kind of did some little bit of gossiping here and personality deflection over here, but they didn't really talk about what kind of person and who are the people that are keeping spiritualism alive, who are still talking about that basic message. And then you have the people that are not quite sure what spiritualism is, but they're hanging around with their own belief system around the outskirts. Because spiritualism is meant to very clearly and cleanly prove the continuity of life and live the principles of natural law principles. And I like all the other juicy stuff too. But I like
I like that, Nancy. I like all the other juicy stuff. Yeah. Well, but there's the thing. To think that all of these free thinkers got along wonderfully and just were all about kumbaya, I think you would have to be ignorant. We're people. We're people with our own opinions, passionate about a subject, the continuity of life. I don't know anyone who isn't passionate about that subject, right? And the thing is, and, so just kind of quickly in my mind, just to give props to the states that still have camps, right? You have Maine. Maine has 3 camps. You have New York, you
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
Connecticut, you have I think Wigwam. I don't know if it's New Hampshire or Connecticut. You have
Wigwam is in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, thank you. You have, Florida, you have Cassadaga, you have Indiana Camp, Camp Chesterfield. You have in my state, I'm always a supporter of, camps. You have Wanawak Spiritualist Camp. There was one in Iowa, it's no longer there. There's one in Kansas, there's one in Arizona, there's one in California, possibly two. I did not check to see. I know Harmony Grove is there.
Yeah.
Oh, the great state of Michigan. They
Oh,
they have a Christian spiritualist camp, which is
yeah.
awesome. Snowflake, been there, love it. There's also 2, 3 other I think one, and that's the thing too, Nancy, you have to really expand and look into the history and knowledge to get all factors. Like back to what you were saying about, kind of these communities, and especially ones where people live year round, right? Much different if we only go attend during the summer. But when we live in the camp, right? You're living with all these people. But there was a national organization that formed, originally the NSA, and then a bunch of ones broke off. You had the Independent Spiritualist Association, you have the Spiritual Alliance, you have the SNUI. I mean, there's so many different, so you need to really dig deep into your state's history. You might find that there's a spiritualist camp or church in your backyard and you didn't even know it.
I think that there used to be a list. I remember when I first learned about spiritualism, I had no idea what it was. I was totally like, what is this? And I Googled it because
Yep.
Google existed then. Back, in my world, Google
Yes.
still is new, but and there was a whole list of spiritualist churches and camps that you could access, but there it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
A lot of the churches aren't there. Some of the camps have closed. But in let's talk a little bit about how we had these very excitement for the camps, and they were seasonal, and
Yes.
definitely more summer. Um, and then they became churches, or the groups of
Yeah.
people became churches. Like Camp Etna has a church next to it,
Yeah.
and Lilydale has a church outside of the grounds.
And inside.
And
Lily
inside.
has churches inside and out. Yeah. And I think, and again, if you look back in the time frame, so like I know for a fact, Lilydale Assembly, which used to, I think was the City of Lights originally, that charter, they were a society before they were a camp, or they were a camp before they were a church, excuse me.
Yeah.
But eventually, and that's the movement, right? So here you have these people gathering together. A lot of them too were ministers of other religions. They were Unitarian Universalists. They were Quakers, they were Shakers, they were, Baptists, they were Methodists, they were other ministers. But this movement, I love that we call it a movement, because I don't know what else to call it, because it's just energy, right? Moving forward. This movement then started to trigger, they took it back to their churches, right? And then certain churches were like, not in here, that's devil's work, or not in here, but in the basement's okay. Like, you know, mm, and eventually what happened, I think, is that people just said, you know what, enough with this. We want our own church where we're following our principles, and we're not necessarily blending spiritualism with with other religion,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's why, and I think that's why you started to see breakoffs, hence Christian spiritualism. They're like, no, we want both, we're going to have both, and we're going to do it. And they did. And good for them. Because again, no one owns spiritualism. No one person created it that owns it. No one deity owns it. No one person owns spiritualism. It is literally just a natural creation that we can tap into or not tap into. And so, I think some people, they started forming churches. Like I know in my history, I traveled a lot of spiritualist churches, um, some independent, some part of bigger organizations. And, they all run a little bit differently. And I think to me, I'm just going to say this, it's kind of controversial. I think they should run in. I think they, if you're a minister and you're running a church, you know what your congregation needs and wants. And I think you need to run it in a way that maybe follows simple guidelines, because spiritualism is simple.
Very simple. Yeah, it is. It's got the principles.
9 principles.
You can go online, you can search the spiritualist principles, 9 of them. And
or 7. Some have 7. Who cares?
That's true. That's true. And some of them are written a little bit differently, but they do hold this SNUI is a little different. But they do hold the same concepts.
Yeah.
In them. Yeah.
And so I think that's when you started to see churches either transfer into spiritualism, or just people breaking off saying we're going to start our own church. And so like through the early 1910s and 20s and 30s, all of these people, and especially major organizations, started looking at ways of like, okay, so how do we credential? How do we present ourselves to the masses? Because, after the 20s, spiritualism, I don't want to say took a back seat, but it wasn't the blazing fire it was from like 1850 to 1900. So things had to start changing, and they were looking at evolving, as any movement needs to kind of look to evolve, right? Because it's energy and it's moving. And so then those churches formed. And I know, like, for a fact, in my little state of Wisconsin, at one point in time, in its peak, so about 1918 to 1924, there was over 15 spiritualist churches and a camp.
Wow.
And the camps, and most camps in that time period, the churches would close during camp season, and everyone from those churches gathered at the camps, hence the thousands of people, right?
And there's a lot of churches that still hold that tradition in New England. They close in the summer.
Yeah. Because they're trying to promote going to the camp, supporting the, bigger parent, if you would, because I think camps are like, I don't want to say that. I think churches and camps are equal. Let me just explain that. Like, I don't think there's one that's above the other, but camps were formed to kind of help bring in, either the big speakers or, things where maybe a little church couldn't afford that. So the camps were kind of that gathering community for everyone to come to. And so camps kind of have that, Zaza Zoo, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, of their seasons, right? That's what you hear, that because all camps have a season. Most camps they might be open to the public year round, but they're not doing, all the services and all the teachings and all the demonstrations, that's only during their season.
Right. So yeah, I love that Camp Edna has a hotel still there. And Temple Heights you can rent rooms there too.
Temple Heights and Chesterfield still has places. Casadega has that hotel. Well, Casadega doesn't own the hotel, but there's a hotel on the property still. That's the original hotel.
And Lilydale has tons of beds and breakfasts.
Oh, tons. And then, like, I know some of the camps in Michigan might have cabins that can be rented. Wanawak has like a little motel with camps. Sadly, Harmony Grove, if you're out there, shout out to Harmony Grove in California. They had a devastating fire a few years back. I can't remember the exact date, and I know they lost a lot of their buildings. Oh, and then I can't even believe it. I can't even believe one of my favorite camps, Camp Edgewood, which is in between Seattle and Tacoma on Surprise Lake. Oh, and that's the other thing with camps. I don't mean to digress, but
don't digress. Go ahead.
You need to just go to these camps and look at the locations of where these camps are. They found the most beautiful, energetic spaces that you could imagine. Like, first of all, how many people, if you've been to Lilydale, so many people walk through the gates and they're like, oh my God, I'm home. Like, this is the best thing. Like, they just feel the peace of Lilydale.
There's been a lot of energetic activity on Lilydale as well.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal.
But I think too, at all camps, like, Wanawak's on top of a cliff, like in the middle of Wisconsin, like just the weirdest places. Well, look at Lilydale, Western New York, just the weirdest kind of places.
Vortexes or something. There's something going
There's
on.
just something magical, even. And
Yeah.
what I love about Edgewood, I was Camp Edgewood in Washington State. They're on Surprise Lake, and it was literally a lake that just formed overnight, just sunk, a big
It
sinkhole.
was a surprise lake.
But
Wow.
Surprise Lake. And it's now it's built up, it's crazy. It's like you enter a little like piece of heaven because everything else around it's so built up, and this is just this beautiful natural. They have a place to stay. It's amazing. you know
It is.
Sunset in Kansas, again, amazing. Just these. So get out, at least feel, if you can't make it to, like, if you're on the West Coast and you can't make it to Lilydale, or if you're on the East Coast and you want to go somewhere different, check out the Midwest. Check out these places and just go look.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. You're thinking.
Fun.
Yeah. So now we're talking about the camps, and we're talking about the different factions of spiritualism. Are these camps, some of them can be factions, or are they kind of all the same, or each camp has a different philosophy of spiritualism? What do you know about that?
Well, I think that there's going to be subtle differences in every camp or church, even, and I'll just put churches in there too, because of the people who run them, right? Um, I'm so I don't know what the right word is, Nancy. I guess I'll say it out loud, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a
Yeah.
diehard spiritualist. So for me, my beliefs and the way that I think, or the way that, is my truth, is very much what some might call traditional spiritualism, right? Like, doesn't mean I don't believe, in certain things, or at least discuss it, but I just really am like, let's prove that continuity. Period. Like, I have your Uncle James, and he's telling me this, and this is, he was born on this day. Like, that's kind of where I like to do that mediumship. I recognize all kinds of mediumship because we're all different. There's not one medium that's
Excellent.
like the other. And thank God, because spiritualism never wanted cookie cutter mediums and cookie cutter healers and cookie cutter ministers. Look at who we were founded by, for the love of goodness sakes, right? So they want that diversity, but we also need a little bit of structure. So we're not Willy Wonka, right? So we're not like, because a lot of people don't understand the difference between psychic and mediumship work now.
No, you still get clients that come in and say, can I have a mediumship reading? And I said, and I'll bring in their, and they go, what are you talking about? I don't want to hear from, I just want to know what my future is. And I'm like, okay, let's step back here and talk about, just saying to everybody who's listening, mediumship is proving the continuity of life you'll bring through a loved one, and they'll have a message for you. Psychic reading is about what's happening around you energetically in your auric field, but usually not bringing through a loved one. But not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychic.
Yep.
They have to be. So,
Yep.
but they're not talking to a generic thing. They're bringing through a specific intelligence that wants to give you a message. Just for those who are listening who didn't know, I didn't.
Listen, I love it, Nancy, because the thing is as spiritualists, we need to educate, because there's so much miseducation out there, because there are some mediums who aren't spiritualists, and that's okay too. And that's absolutely fine. But when someone says, I'm a spiritualist medium, or I'm a spiritualist minister, I'm not a spiritual minister. I'm a spiritualist minister.
Mhm.
Is there a bunch of differences? Probably not. But I'm sorry, Nancy, I just decided I want to call you Peg. So your name's Peg for the rest of the night. You wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So, there is, I don't lean heavy on semantics of words. A lot of times when I say God, I'll say God, nirvana, consciousness, universe. I don't care whatever terminology you want to use, but depending on who you're talking to, and more importantly, how are they listening to you, you need to know how to be able to communicate to all genres of information. So for me, when I call myself a spiritualist, it has that connotation that I follow the guidelines, principles, theories, ideologies that fellow past spiritualists have paved the way for. So it's not like, don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have paranormal discussion, I'm happy to have
Oh, yeah, we're going to do that.
near-death experiences, I'm happy to have all of that, but in my heart of hearts, I want to, I'm a spiritualist. I believe in the continuity of life. I believe that it can be proven, and I feel like it enhances life when you know that you're eternal.
Let's talk about that a little bit. It enhances life when you know that you are eternal.
A big statement.
Because sometimes I think we miss the point of that. We are eternal, and proving the continuity of life was so important back in the day, and it still is now. Why? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think because when you look at the movement when it started to where we look at today, right? I mean, just in theaters alone, what, 3 months ago, there was an entire movie about NDEs, near-death experiences,
Yeah.
and people touching in to a quote unquote afterlife, whatever that is, but an existence beyond this physical world.
Yeah.
And so now I think it's more important than ever to give those, evidential readings to prove the continuity, not to help people live their life by the direction of spirit, but to live their life for the direction of their spirit.
Yes.
Because you get connected.
Yeah.
Once, like, I remember getting my first mediumship reading. It was in Lilydale, by Carol Gasper, and God bless her. She's now living on the high life on the spirit side. But when somebody sat down and knew things about my grandmother and my child and what my child was playing with in the middle of the night, it got me questioning, oh, what is this? And why do you know this? And what is my purpose? And who am I?
Right.
And it was through that, I don't want to call it a simple reading, but that's really what it was. It was just a simple reading, opened my door to an awareness of natural and spiritual laws, of energy, of consciousness, of continuity. And it just, for me, it opened Pandora's box. And I think any person who gets a reading and for 1 minute they think, even if it's just for 1 minute, they think, wow, how did she or he or they know that I had an Uncle Ted that everyone called George?
And then you realize that was George talking.
Yeah.
George
Or
had.
that I'm not separate from,
Mhm.
that I'm not alone in this little world, isolating myself or isolated from everything. Instead, it starts to make you realize I'm connected to everything. And the way you live life is just different after that.
It is.
It's just different. And for me, it's a difference that brings me utmost joy and, and peace most of the time, except for those days I have to take, real big responsibility. Those real days of responsibility. Oh, who wants to do that,
Yeah. So as we've been looking at mediumship from the heyday but now we're seeing the spiritualism kind of drop in numbers. Churches have been closing over the pandemic shut, really took a lot of churches. There was teetering and then boom, shut down. So let's talk a little bit about that. You had some very strong ideas. Where do you think spiritualism is now, and where do you think it's heading?
So I think, so again, I'm just going to say spiritualism will never die. It's not, no, nothing ever dies. I think the movement's changing. I think it's changing in a profound way, because we're all changing in a profound way, right? So let's just look at a plain and simple fact. I mean, this is just a fact, if you want to call it a fact in this big world that we live in. More generations are living because people are living longer. So it is very typical to have 5 generations living still in the physical world. So you have your old, like, God, I'll just talk about my family, my old Italians that came over, on the boat, you have them still alive. And you have my daughter here who is born into technology, right? Doesn't probably even, she does know how to write cursive, thank goodness. But
they don't teach it anymore. I'm shocked to find that out.
yeah.
But
so you have this vast array of beliefs or traditions or non-traditions,
and
right?
life
Because
experience. Yeah.
life experiences, and not one of them is either good or bad. They just are. And they're different. And just like we want our voice to be heard, so do the younger generation, so do the older generation. And so somehow we have to start having really big conversations, and conversations that aren't pretty and unicorny and kumbaya and all of those great things that we do want to cultivate in our lives. But we also have to have these really other difficult discussions, because a lot of the young, and now please understand, when I say younger and older generation, I am not talking about age. I am talking about thought processes.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Some people can embrace change, and almost to a default. They want so much change they can't sit still, right? So they're constantly changing, which might be chaotic for us if we're not that way. And then we have the other thought, the generation of the traditional, or this is how it's always been.
Yeah. You have the analog generation and the digital generation. Then you have the horse and buggy generation. Then you
Yeah.
have like black and white TV people. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have all of this happening all at the same time. So first of all, let's just talk about that. Great time to be alive. Great
Right.
time to be alive, because you literally can go homestead it and live with a horse and buggy, or you can fly to space, because that's what people are doing right now. So you have, the world as your oyster, right? But for our movement, I think to, start beginning to be what's the word? Reinvented, or to keep the momentum moving forward. We have to look at the beauty in tradition and the beauty in the unknown. And we need to amp up. I remember being taught, well, we can't say chakras. We can't say chakras. We call them energy centers. Who says? Who says? Because I know there's pioneers who wrote books like Letter Better or Letter Beater, or I'm sorry if I'm screwing up their name.
Yeah.
Wrote a book, and it's chakras in there, and that was written in 1920.
Well, the chakras are ancient too. So you have Helen Blavatsky talking about it, but
Exactly.
then you
So
have the past life argument. Yeah, but we'll go
I
there.
think my personal opinion, Nancy, is I think as much as I understand the beauty in churches, I understand more of the beauty in unity. And
Okay.
so if I am back into a tent, or if I am standing in a building, or if I am swimming in a lake with like-minded individuals, sharing the sacredness of some of the tradition, and also sharing the ideology and theology of new idea and new thought. And somehow these two worlds have to come together.
Well, they do.
And
That's where how spiritualism was founded, on free thinkers, the new thinkers, the change. So
yeah.
if we try to bury ourselves into the thought from the 1900s without embracing the thought in the 2000s, we're gonna lose. We've lost our heritage. Is what I'm not saying we're losing. We're proving the continuity of life, and we're showing the sacredness of life, and we're saying something that's timeless. On the other hand, there is different sciences happening. There's different understandings going on, and
Absolutely.
we have to engage in them. There's tons of different research that's been happening to bring some light, shed some light on some of the experiences people have been talking about for forever, and we somehow, as a spiritualist movement, need to embrace that and have conversations about it and accept it.
Yeah.
But
It's
I don't
exactly it.
see that's happening. Sometimes it's happening, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you gotta kind of, not say too much, but just go, cause if, but other times, I still feel like the traditionalist spiritualists stay pure to that message, those principles of life and principles of that God is a source and that we come from source and that we all have eternal lives.
Yeah.
And we still think and breathe. And we still not breathe, but we
And
still
that's
grow.
and that simpleness of that,
Yeah.
and here's the other thing I think we need to learn just as a society, really, just as a collective consciousness of energy. We need to learn how to discuss and talk to each other again.
Yeah.
Because if I say, and I notice this a lot right now within the movement, because there's this talk about defining exactly, like, what is it exactly we believe? Well, to me it's simple. We believe, just like you said, source, this idea of some guiding principles, natural spiritual law, learning the law of energy, that's how we live, and that we're eternal. Three simple things. Now, you get inside the gates of a spiritual community or spiritualist community, because it happens in our own movement. So I'm not even going to say that it doesn't. And let's talk about reincarnation. And all of a sudden, you have half the population saying, we don't believe in it. It's fake. It's phony. And then you have half of the population saying, how can you not believe in it? It's true. It's been proven. Have you read this book and that book and this book and that book? And then there's me in the middle going, well, yes, that child who recalled all of that information up until the age of 8. Very good. How do we know, though, that that child just wasn't seeing a spirit guide or a person next to them having a conversation? Because by the time he turned 8, the skull fused. And that's when most times they say children start to lose because I think children are born with a connection to where they came from, everything. And as we grow up, by no fault of our parents or by who raised us, we become desensitized to things. We program in our mind, oh, that's just my imagination. That could never have happened. Oh, that's, or our religion started to dictate, right? This is what we believe. This isn't what we believe. And no one wants to really have it. It's like, well, you're either on my team or you're not on my team. Either you believe it or you don't. I'm like,
That's a mistake. That's where the mistake happens.
what happened to the table? Like, can we come to the table? And yes, maybe those that sit on this side of the table are firm believers, and these are firm believers and not believing it. However it is, right? Who cares? But at least we can share the table.
Yeah.
And I think, that's why, I know I'm back on a soapbox, but if you think about these camps, right? Tens of thousands of people showed up not to really see the demonstration of mediumship, the proof of continuity. But what they showed up to is they showed up to hear the debates. They showed up to hear the spirit guides talk about what the other side is like. They came to talk about challenging what they thought was already their truth.
Yes.
And I think that if you're a spiritualist and you're not challenging your truth on a regular basis, you become stagnant. And that has produced the movement of becoming stagnant. I'm being real political here, and I don't mean to be, but we have to start.
We have to start bringing it to the table because there is a shift happening, and there is where there's a shift towards less and less, and there's so much that could be lost if we don't keep the movement going and nurturing it based on what we know here. And I like the idea of why the sides. Where's the table? I'm going to remember that. Where's the table? and the idea that they came to the camps so they could argue, so they could debate, so they could really, because they were in that day and age, they wanted to understand. They were breaking away from loyalist or royalist thinking. They were breaking away from the church is God. They were breaking away, and they really, where do I go now? Who am I? What do I do? And we have the same, a very similar, not the same, time in this time frame where people are, churches have fallen apart. Where do I go? Where's my morality? What's real in life? and we have, the emotional and psychological issues that are happening. And what does it mean? And who am I? And is life worth it? And it's like, and then spiritualism still has a huge place and a huge
Huge.
role to play in all that.
Especially when it comes to the lifestyle of living, right? Because once the continuity has been demonstrated, right? Once you have gotten a message that just convinces you that life is eternal, then you want to live this life as best as you can for
Yeah.
preparation into the spiritual life. And so you want to look about natural laws and spiritual laws and the law of attraction, the law of vibration, and the law of desire, and the law of intention. And you want to start living from a space that's more organically and energetically driven than man driven or woman driven, just that is soul driven. You want to start living from the place of the soul. And this is where spiritualism could thrive if it put on its manners and presented itself out into the world the way it should be versus the way that it is.
Yeah. This is a great conversation to have. And I want to take a tiny little break to tell you that this is Stacy Schuerman, spiritualiststacy.com. You can find her on Facebook as Spiritualist Stacy, and you can email her spiritualiststacy@gmail.com. Stacy's available. She's available for teaching. She's available for sessions, mediumship sessions, soul sessions when you need spiritual one-on-one coaching. And as I say at every show, that I bring people to the podcast who are available to anyone who needs them, and so that you can individually grow your own soul, grow your own understanding, and grow where you need to grow in this moment. And I think Stacy's a good pick. So I really want to encourage you guys
Thanks,
to use the tools.
Use the tools, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. And I just want to also say that I'm Nancy from angelscapes.net. I'm also available, and you can find me on Facebook, Angelscapes, or Nancy Smith of Angelscapes. Don't look for Nancy Smith; it'll kill you. But put that Angelscapes in there, and I'm also available to learn and grow. We're both reverends in the spiritualist tradition, but there's a lot of depth that goes with what we have to offer. So back to this really cool conversation.
Yeah, it is cool. Well, it is what it is, right? It can, I was just thinking when you were talking and we were talking about what spiritualism is. For me, spiritualism, and for you, because you're a spiritualist minister, we decided we're wearing the full ensemble. Our shirt is spiritualism, our pants are spiritualism, our purse is spiritualism. Some people only want spiritualism as a nose ring, accessory. Hey, I don't need to be a spiritualist, but I like this of spiritualism. Hey, that's cool too. Welcome to the table, right? Welcome to that place in the middle.
Yeah. I had somebody's asking right now about her younger brother spoke of a past life at a very young age, and the friends and her research the life that he spoke of. I never once considered that he was connecting with the spirit. She said this thought provoking, and I would come out to say, one of my opinions on what this is about is that we come from soul, and soul has many lifetimes within it, and that we could be remembering the lifetime of our soul. And time is a bubble. And this is another really weird thing. I'm just going out there but time is a bubble. It's not linear. And you can reach out energetically and pick out what you need from the bubble to understand what you're doing. And it may be in another time, another life parallel, another time, another place, because in the spirit world, time doesn't go from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We need for time to go in that direction. I'm not sure this is a philosophy from spiritualism, but there's so much talk around it. I just had to throw my 2 cents in. But
absolutely. And that's what I love about it too. Like, this is the conversation I want to have about past lives or reincarnation or soul lives, or what about current lives? And like you said, if time is a continuum, right? Now watch us all, our minds are gonna go papa. It doesn't exist. Why aren't we ever talking about our future selves? Because our future selves already exist too, right?
Exactly. I know that's a bit, I do when I'm talking about it. I'm like, so
all right.
know how to do this thing. And then I tell somebody, well, what do you think your future self's doing? That what? And it gets all exciting. It's wonderful. But yeah, we have which is really, this is the other question I wanted to ask you, the purpose of spirit communication. So we're talking about proving the continuity of life, but those spirit peoples, those beings that are now on the other side, and they've just, their minds are just in a whole different plane of existence. What do they have to teach us? And,
Oh,
and can they help us move forward in what we have to move forward in when on this planet right now? I think they do, but what do you think, Stacy?
I think absolutely they do. Again, I think again that proof of continuity, which is what spiritualism tends to kind of focus in on, right? So spiritualism should be broad and big, like a big old telescope, but sometimes it's like a microscope. And sometimes we focus in on the proof of continuity through evidential mediumship. But what about spirit guides? What about, higher beings? Angels, guides, teachers, masters, I don't care, whatever you want to call them. They have all kinds of things. I mean, look at Maurice Barbanel channeling or trancing White Eagle, I believe it was. No.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was White Eagle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Seth was Maurice. I think I'm pretty sure it was White Eagle. That was Maurice Barbanel, right? Hopefully, maybe somebody listening, if you know, but you had some of these mediums. Well, look at Mary Vanderbilt, right? From Camp Etna. Silver Birch. There it is. Silver
There you
Birch.
go. Okay. I knew.
Thank you. Thank you to Tom. I saw he just put that in the comments and I knew it was there. I love it. But, so yes, some of these mediums move more into or past or aside or up or down. I don't care. I don't want to put it in a hierarchy into the spiritual realm, which in that realm all exists. So why wouldn't we want to hear from people that are living in that realm and what they can see and sense and understand about our realm that might inspire us or help us or send hope or joy to us to live this realm to the fullest? So absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got so many resources there.
Yeah.
So many resources that we haven't even, opened you said it opened up Pandora's box, and all these things are in Pandora's box, but we're looking at, out of hundreds, we're looking at 5.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more growth and development that it can happen and is happening underneath the hood of a lot of stuff. But if you get in, I feel into studying spiritualism, I haven't even gotten to the bottom of it.
I don't think we ever will, to be honest. And I think that, trying to get to the bottom of it is good. We need to keep evolving but we also have to keep trying to spread it to the top, right? We still need to kind of keep that ball moving. And so I think that, again, we have to look at, I don't know, defining, I don't know what the right word is, Nancy, but we have to look at a way of bringing the tradition, because like I said, we're here. You and I get to publicly announce without fear of jail or prosecution that we are spiritualists and that we communicate with the world unseen. I don't even want to call them dead because they're more living than I am. I feel like maybe I'm the dead one.
Get
you
on
know,
your, yeah.
yeah, right. Um, we communicate, we get to do this freely because of the backs of the thousands of people who paved the way for us. And we would be doing ill service by not recognizing their work, but we're also doing ill service by not recognizing our own and being the voice of today's spiritualists and moving it forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a powerful way.
Well said. Yeah. I was thinking of one of the churches. Well, I belong to this Quincy church, and I did a little interview with somebody about the history, Rita Berkowitz, the history, and there's a beautiful photo of this group. But it was the Ladies Society and something I can't remember, but they had nothing. They didn't say anything about spiritualism because it was illegal to do mediumship. They would be arrested.
Yeah.
And there was a man that came in. Spiritualism was just starting to become a religion, and it was a man that joined the Ladies Society and opened the church and started the church. So we still had that struggle with male female kind of thing. And
Well, you're talking about owning property. Who would have sold a piece of property to a woman or a group of women back then? They had to be pretty progressive thinkers to do that.
And they were teetering, but they weren't quite there. But the state was not there for allowing them to do it without arresting them.
Yeah.
So again, there was this breakthrough in spiritualism, and then there were all these fear laws that came up, and becoming a religion, put it under the umbrella of you can't discriminate against any religion in our Constitution. Kind of thing. And anyways, we still have to move forward. We still have to question and wonder and bring new thought to the table. I love that idea. Whose side are you on? Where's the table at? I'm taking that home with me forever.
Well, and this goes into a good part of, what we were talking about. One of the questions you had talked about like, religious traditions. The thing is, you got to remember, yes, spiritualism is, a science, philosophy, and religion. Yes, we are religion. Yes, we have churches. Yes, we have camps, right? Yes, but we're not a dogmatic religion.
No.
So, like, one of the things as a spiritualist, and good thing if people are going to throw rotten tomatoes at the computer, they're only ruining their computer, not mine. People try to tend and tie us to Halloween. We have nothing to do with Halloween. Nothing. The veil is always thin for mediums. We are always talking to the other side.
The veil is
not just on a particular day, and no disrespect. Oh, my light flashed out. Look at, maybe I am getting somebody on the other side. My light just went out.
Oh, no.
Gotta be careful now. But in the science, philosophy, and religion of spiritualism, we don't really have any real religious holidays or traditions. But that being said, we're not opposed to them either. Do like, for example, I grew up, Christian, Catholic, Baptist. I have my grandma's ceramic Christmas tree. I'm always going to put up a Christmas tree. My kids open presents at Christmas. If I've been raised Jewish, I might have a menorah. If Kwanzaa, I might, how many different religious traditions are there? And spiritualism will recognize them all as a beautiful tradition, but we don't necessarily have a religious holiday. We celebrate March 31st as the advent of modern spiritualism. And some of us look at solstice. Some of us look at astrology or moons. I guess to me, we need to focus, like I said, we need to kind of focus our, beliefs, and then acknowledge that I celebrate this tradition, because you know what? It's tradition. It's comfortable. I want to open presents on December 25th and just celebrate family and love.
Well, if you go to any spiritualist church, it's what I kind of come to think, maybe not any, but there will be many religions, many people with many religious backgrounds within, because again, we're going back to that concept of spiritualism was meant to augment religions that believe that life continued after death, and we are the place that proves it. That shows you, that really makes that connection strong. And so I've been in my church. There's Jewish contingency, there's Buddhist contingencies, there's Wiccan contingencies, and there's something there for them. And I'm really proud of that, to be honest with you. But
as we should be. That's spiritualism being welcoming. Again, if somebody only wants to wear the accessory of spiritualism, I just want to rock this nose ring because I believe that, you're a medium and you can communicate and demonstration makes me feel good, then let them rock that. For me, I need to be full decked out. and I'll say I'm a spiritualist, and I do it that way. But again, there's no sides. And I think that our leaders, our teachers, you teaching, me teaching, we just teach the ways that, we're taught by us, trickle down throughout the history of the movement.
Beautiful. I love it. The other thing I was going through my head while you were talking, and I was barely listening to what you're saying because I was going through a thought.
I love it. Do that. Go through the thought.
Spiritualists the principles. We talk about spiritualism, improving the continuity of life, but the principles are so rich and deep that and they are a beautiful design for living a full life. And even spiritualism doesn't talk about it enough. And
Absolutely right. I agree.
we're all mediums. No, you're healers, and you live in soul to soul. Because in your work on your website, I said how to live in harmony with your own soul, and helping people to get in touch with their souls. That's a big part of my work. Is where do you feel disconnected in your life? Well, you need that shows you where you're disconnected from your soul.
Yeah.
And spiritualism talks about that. It talks about the same energy that you go into to connect with the spirit on the other side is the same energy that you connect to trance, is the same energy you use for healing, because it's source energy. And this is something that I would love to hear more about in all of the spiritualist traditions. And I feel like this is what spiritualism needs to come to the table to really talk about that out loud. Because when we connect to our soul, that's when we're living. That's when we're creative. That's when we solve all these problems, is soul connection. And so I'm off the soapbox now. But you know what I'm saying? So
I love it. I love our 9 principles and the history of the 9 principles. Like I said, some have 7, but depending on what, spiritualist organization you belong to, really look into those principles, discover why the people and why spirit, because some were given from spirit world. Some of them weren't just, produced by, one single person just writing them down. They were produced by the information they received from spirit. And then it was a collective group of people that said, we are going to adopt these as our guidelines, as our principles. And, and watch how they've developed over time. I know, for example, one of the principles in the organization I grew up with was, the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul here or hereafter.
that kills people. Yeah.
But it actually stated when it was first written, any human soul. And through coming to the table and having discussion, they realized we can't just say human soul, because our animals have souls. Any living thing has a soul. And so, they got rid of that word. They changed that principle, and they continue to change. Like you said, like now the church I joined to, they have principles. They're written a little bit differently, but they mean the same thing. Right. So they're really profound. To me, I call them the Cliff Notes versions of how to live life. And if you get up every day and you follow those 9 or 7 principles, right? So the first one is, I believe in infinite intelligence, or we believe in a God of our own understanding, right? So right there, first thing out of bed, do you feel the source of God in you and around you? It should be the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning. And that we believe living spiritually is the representation of God. Okay, are you doing that? Are you being personal responsible? Are you bringing happiness or unhappiness to yourself? Are you embracing the healing, the prophecy that comes from mediumship? Do you truly believe and know you do not die? These are all questions you have. And if tomorrow's not promised, right? Then are you living for today, right? That's what that principle means to me. The one that we speak, to the soul called dead. It's like, well, listen, that shows me I'm eternal. So am I living like I'm eternal, or am I living like, oh, I'm just living to live and not be?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, fun, Nancy. Gosh, we could probably talk for hours.
I know we could talk for hours. We've been talking for an hour. So I do need to say this has been an amazing conversation. We're gonna have to continue it another time because I think it's worth it. And then we can digress into something even more wild.
Yeah, I love it. And thanks everyone for tuning in and watching.
I definitely am so excited to share all this good stuff. And I'm so grateful, Stacy, that you came on, and you have such an excited really unique way of looking at spiritualism and the messages that you're bringing brings it alive into a new generation. So for now, I just want to thank Stacy for coming, and I want to just let the blessings of spirit flow over everyone who's listening, and use the tools. Remember that loving yourself connects you into your spirit connects you into your soul, and your soul connects you into source, into God. And that's the pathway to living a full life. And that's what these podcasts are for. So for now, go with grace, go with God, with many blessings. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.